Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got a great show tonight. Wow, our good friend Heather Woodward's coming on with us tonight. Last minute, I'm really impressed with her. It's going to be a phone interview tonight because she has some sick kids at her house, so she didn't think she'd have video ready. But I'm just happy to have a guest after what went wrong yesterday. And as it turns out, it was my modem that was causing the problem. I was up with Xfinity because by the time I get done working, and trying to find more guests and stuff, it's usually around 11, 12 o'clock in the evening. So I got on the phone with Xfinity about midnight, and I was on till around 1:30 trying to figure out what it was because you know how Xfinity is. I had already rebooted my main internet thing box, but they had to go through the steps and all this had to happen. And then we found out it was the modem. I had to unplug the modem and plug it back in. So I feel good about tonight. I have good juju tonight. I want to welcome you guys. My name is Charlotte. I am the host of California Haunts Radio. I am also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We have 35 people up and down the state. We also have people in Washington, Nevada, and Hawaii. Someday I'll get to Hawaii. I'm a Hawaii person, okay? Aloha. And yeah, so I got one announcement to make, and then we're going to get Heather on because I have so many questions about investigations she's done in Arizona. I have one of her books that she wrote, or I think two of her books actually that she wrote about like Jerome and different places like that. But there's also something she's done not a couple of years ago she did down in Los Angeles that absolutely intrigued me because I had heard stories about this thing, and you probably have too. Okay, so we're going to talk to her about that as well. So anyway, the announcement is I now have at the meetup. I now have announced the ghost tour, and we're starting to get interest in there. There's only 10 spots, okay? But you're going to go on a real ghost investigation, and it's not going to be this thing where the psychic's leading you around or nothing. Get to use our equipment, get to go on a 3-4 hour ghost investigation with my team, and they'll teach you how to use stuff, how to set up cameras, how to do all that stuff, and you'll get to learn what actually goes on in a ghost hunt. So if you're interested in that, go to California Haunts Meetup, and you can get the info from there. It's on the calendar. And then tonight, I will post the same information up on my website at californiahauntsradio.com. Okay? Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to get Heather. Get this show on the road. I'm so glad she did this. Hello. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, I'm going to put you on speakerphone. I'm going to put you on the mic right now.
Okay.
Here we go. Hopefully the mic won't fall. It has a nasty tendency. Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Guys, Heather Woodward is here. Heather and I have known each other for years via Facebook. She was also on my other show when I was on Blog Talk many, many years ago.
Many moons ago.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
long ago.
yeah. And then last year she was on this show, and it was really great to have her. I have a lot of questions. There's some questions I have for her. I even have your books.
Oh, okay.
Haunted, yes?
I just finished the third book. It just went to the publisher 2 weeks ago.
Awesome. What's that one on?
Erie, Oklahoma. It is folklore, the Native American folklore here, Bigfoot, a whole bunch of haunted places, stuff like that.
Right on. I have always been fascinated by Arizona, like Jerome, and I even went to because I was there for spring training for the A's a few years back. And Nancy Matz at the time was living in Tucson, so she took us up to the OK Corral.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And even during the day, that place is incredible.
OK Corral?
Yeah, the whole thing, that whole town. I mean, when you go into Big Nose Kate's, and you're down there looking at that hole where that guy was, you can feel him there.
Oh, yeah, in Tombstone, yeah. I mean, the whole area is wicked haunted. There's no way around it.
And I know one of the friends that I was with, the psychic, and she took me aside and said, "Hey, somebody just walked up to me in the street. He's got this kind of odd hat on, And then we went to the hat store, and I said, "What's the hat look like?" Took a picture, and then I go back, the hotel, and I start Googling, and it turns out the guy's buried at the cemetery there. I mean, that's cool, you know?
That's Tombstone for you, though.
Yeah.
The whole area is like that. I mean, the bird cage. I mean, I know it gets a lot of hype, and a lot of places that get a lot of hype usually aren't as haunted as people say they are. But the bird cage is one of those places where, if you've ever done a investigation there, like I've done it twice, where we got the whole place to ourselves. We paid for the overnight investigation, and they give you the option of whether you want the lights on or off.
Oh, that's cool.
So you can either keep the lights on and then they leave, or they turn off the lights and they leave and they lock you in.
Wow.
I've always done it with the lights off, and it does not disappoint. It's definitely, you go in there and you definitely feel like you're moving through another time period.
It is weird because we were there during the day and nobody was in there, so I pulled out my EVP recorder. Of course, I can't. You're carrying one all the time, and I actually picked up piano music during the day.
Yeah, that's definitely something that happens a lot.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's Tombstone is definitely a place where you will experience something whether you want to or not. With you can be a skeptic and still go through that place, and it's definitely a time capsule. And like I said, the Birdcage Theater is definitely a time capsule for sure. It's one of those places where if you want to really experience something, go there. Just realize you're going to experience something in it. Sometimes it's a little scary. One time I went there, and I was sitting on the steps of the stage, and something hit the wall behind me so hard that the whole theater shook. So,
wow.
I mean, you'll have stuff like that happen where you're like, okay, I can't leave. Great, I'll just sit here. And you just kind of figure it out.
Isn't the Black Mariah there too?
Yes, it's still there, yes.
Did you get any impressions off of that at all? Because I would think that would, well, sometimes, like with cemeteries, it's not like people think it is, But did you get anything, with your abilities off the Black Mariah?
Yeah, it's definitely, there's something there. I'm not sure what it is. You're not really supposed to touch it because there's so many superstitions around it, but just being really close to it, there is an energy that emanates off of it. And if you've ever experienced a haunted location, you know what I'm talking about. There's this tense kind of frenetic energy that happens, and it's another one of those ones where you're like, okay, is it worth the hype? And it totally is. I mean, there's just some places where you go there and you're like, okay, something's going on here. It's one of those places. Black Mariah definitely is that thing.
For people that don't know, the Black Mariah is an old-timey hearse. Horse-drawn hearse. And they keep it at the birdcage. What do you think it is with old towns? Like even here in, where I'm at in NorCal, Placerville, old Sacramento. Why do ghosts hang out in these old towns?
I mean, my running theoretical analysis is just based on the 20 plus years I've been doing this. First of all, it has to do with the energy of the old West, or just old timey. There was a lot more ups and downs. There's a lot of strife, but then there was a lot of good times too. So especially if there were brothels or a lot of like saloons or anything like that, there's definitely that extra energy. And then you gotta remember, like, people back then were like coming out here mostly for the gold rush, and so there was this optimism and this hope, and so there's just this very like high energy,
right? And
when they failed hard. They didn't have houses, you know what I mean? So like they had nowhere to go. So there's definitely this energy that is very like high highs, low lows. There's a lot of peaks, and that creates a haunting. Also, I noticed that a lot of the places that are super uber haunted, like for instance Tombstone, there is a ton of silver underneath the ground because they mine silver there. Also, there's a ton of quartz. So when you have these metals and these natural stones that create energy, or they're catalysts for energy, you have these high points and these low points, and then you have these things in the ground that are amplifying it. And so it kind of gets trapped in its own little vortex. That's how I feel about it, or in its own little portal. So it's like when you go into some of these towns, I mean, I'm sure you've felt this. It almost feels like you're going back into that time period.
Yeah,
it's not just going there. It's like, I'm reliving some sort of history.
Oh, it does. And I agree with you about the quartz and stuff, because a lot, like, and I'm sure you've done some ghost hunting up here in the Gold Country, because a lot of the areas that are up here, like Murphy's and Ione, there's a lot of caves underneath. So you've got that stuff going through, and that's why it's so charged,
And also water. Water is a great conductor. So if you have, like, okay, so in Arkansas, for instance, like Eureka Springs is uber haunted. I did some history on it. And it's an old town. And when I did the history, I was like, oh my gosh, there's all these waterways, underground water tables.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you have a ton of crystals. And like, that's double amplification right there. Like, nothing is going to get out of there. Anything that happens there is going to stay there. The energy is just going to, it's not going anywhere. It's going to kind of create a vortex.
You know what I have a thing about in these old buildings, when I do go to old towns, is the bathrooms. If I'm going to get contacted, it's going to be in a bathroom, because I think the plumbing goes down so far, and then you're going to hit the original plumbing or close to it. And that's, that's all got the energy attached to it, and all that stuff's coming up.
Yes. And again, the water, there's something about the water that is very conductive. And I've been, it's so funny you're mentioning it. I've been doing a lot of experiments lately with water and with electricity and just copper pyramids, to see if sitting in a copper pyramid with water actually creates higher frequencies and stuff like that, or higher energy fields. And absolutely it does. We've been playing with SDs, and we've been playing with other kinds of channeling inside of these copper pyramids with water, with electricity. And we find that when we add just one, you don't have to add all three, but if you add one conductor to the variable, your channeling becomes more heightened. It's easier to go into those trance states. And this is just stuff I play with, because I have a lot of friends who are psychic, and I'm like, okay, what if we do this? Will this change it? And it's interesting how it works. And then, when you're going into the field and doing investigations, I see the correlation. I'm like, okay, so if I can pick up on these things with water nearby, or with electricity nearby, or with any kind of copper or metal, then the landscape definitely affects whether a place is haunted or not. It just has to.
Fascinating. You and I, you go back a long way investigating like I do. There's been a lot of equipment. Now that you're talking about, playing around with the copper and water, there's been a lot of equipment that comes and goes. There's a lot of stuff that's on TV that people think is just Marvy. What do you think, overall is one of the best pieces of equipment?
I've tried them all. Like if something comes out and I play with it, and I'm like, okay, like there's, what's the one right now? The REM pods are really popular right now, which is just EMF. But I really, quite honestly, how I get the most effective results is just through asking questions in a regular recorder. I mean, a lot of times when I go in a haunted place, I usually am dowsing rods. I bring dowsing rods, and I bring my phone which has a recorder on it, and I usually get the best results just from that. And myself, I mean, I've played with KT meters, I've played with, I don't know, gas meters, I've played with REM pods, I've played with it all of it, the null meters, all of them, whatever is out there. And I don't know. I always go back to the basics, because that's what works. All this other crap is just, I don't know. It feels superfluous to me, and it feels like it just kind of gets in the way, and it's fancy and it looks cool, but at the end of the day, I mean, my kit right now consists of a K2 meter, some dowsing rods, my phone, and a camera. That's it.
It's funny because TV has been such an influence on people. I know we do investigations where people are disappointed by our equipment.
Yeah.
Because I don't have all that fancy crap. I'm more old school, you know? And I try to explain to them, we're going to be fine. This stuff will, this stuff will get what it needs to get. But people just want to see that ghost hunter stuff, that ghost adventures goodies, and all that. And it's just, I don't know. Some of it's all right, but I mean, like you said, there's nothing like dowsing rods with a digital voice recorder.
Yeah, I mean, it works, and if you know what you're doing and you know what you're looking for, and I think that's what people forget is that when you've been in the field a lot and when you've investigated a lot of places, you know what you're looking for. You know the feeling that you're looking for. You know going in like right away. Like I know walking up to a building, okay, this is going to be a very haunted kind of place, or okay, I'm going to be sitting in a corner all night being really bored. Like I know, just from the feeling of the place as I walk in, and that will help me gauge what to bring. But it's not all fancy crap. And I mean, I do bring SD sometimes too. I mean, but again, that's just a spirit box and headphones and a mask. It's not anything really spectacular, and it's based on stuff that has been, it's based on stuff that's already been in laboratories,
right.
So it's not like it's anything new. It's just bringing something old into the field in a way that is more compact.
The other thing I noticed too is spirit boxes. I'm all for using like an SB11 or an SB7, but because they do pick up radio frequency, I don't like to use them in real populated areas.
I don't either. I hardly ever use. I mean, I have a spirit box app. I have a couple of them on my phone, and I have the SB7, I believe. But yeah, I use them when we go to hotels, in the hotel room, like in the room. I don't ever take them out because it's just too much.
Right.
You have to use them in very, very isolated incidents.
Right.
And a lot of times what we do is, this is something that we've been doing recently, which I find to be even more interesting. And a lot of people are going to be like, what? But what we do is we do the SDs before we go to the place. We write down what we get. So we ask questions about the place before we go there. And then we pull out a tarot deck and we do a reading on the place. And then from that, we see how that correlates with what actually happened. That's
really cool. I like it.
Yeah, so that way we don't have to bring the SD stuff with us.
Yeah.
And I find that it's a lot more interesting that way because we find out a good amount of information just from that whole like SD channeling session, where we write stuff down and we kind of know what we're looking for. We kind of know where to go. We did this just recently. I went to the Fee House, which is in Arkansas. Which city is it in? I don't remember. But anyway, the Fee House, and it was just on Kindred Spirits, and we actually went before Kindred Spirits went and after. And we did that. We did an ST sessions with one of my friends, Stephanie, and she put the headphones on and she did this whole session and recorded it. And then when we went to the place, we asked the owner these questions, and she was like, how did you guys get this information? We're like, well, we have our ways. And and she was very, very accurate. She was very accurate with what she was coming up with. And then later on, she watched the Kindred Spirits episode, and she said, they got a lot of the stuff that we got on our SDs. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah. She's like, it's kind of weird watching it because we were going down the same path.
That's really cool.
Realizing.
That's really cool. Now, my cousin, when I was in Arizona, they really wanted to go ghost hunting real bad. I didn't have a lot of time. But they kept, because they live up near Jerome. Now, is Jerome really as active as they say it is?
Yes. Yes, it is. So there's an interesting thing about Jerome that we found out later. That I found out later because, again, I like to do a lot of experiments on this stuff. So one of the things that I realized about Jerome. So it's a mile high up in the air, and it's on a mound of a mountain, the top of a mountain. So it's like this mound, and it is pyramid shaped. And what I've been finding from my crazy little experiments is that anytime we have a pyramid shape, the energy pulls up. So it spirals upward like a vortex. And so Jerome is at the top of this mountain, and it's full of quartz crystal and all kinds of other stuff. And I'm like, okay, so we have this energy source at the top of the mountain, and then you add on top of that, they had a ton of fires in Jerome. A ton. Yeah, a ton. And so fire is another conductor. And if you've ever, I've done some experiments with fire, and fire does change the ions, like literally changes the ions in an area. So if you have a lot of fire in a place, it changes the ions to negative ions, and negative ions hold energy. So when you go to places that are heavily affected by fire, you're automatically going to have ghostly activity. So between the pyramid shape of the mountain, and then you have all of this crystal, and then fires, it's like guaranteed.
That's interesting. I'm learning things tonight. See, that's why us moldy oldie investigators have to talk to each other, because we can learn from each other, right?
I've done research with ion detectors of negative ions in places that have had fires. You will get great EVPs with places that have had fires. And I've learned now as a psychic to pick up on the energy of fires. Interesting story. So back to the fee house. I went to the fee house the first time, not knowing what it was, not knowing any of the history. Walk in, and one of the things I asked is, was there any fires here in this place? Because I felt the energy of a fire. And they're like, well, there was one fire and somebody died from the fire. I'm like, okay, maybe that's what I'm picking up on. I'm like, no, there's a second fire. There's going to be a second fire. I know which one you're talking about, and I went up to where the fire was, and I'm like, okay, I understand this. This makes sense to me psychically. I said, but I feel like the outside of the building is on fire, and I don't know why, but the fire is really going to be important. And they're like, there's no fires here. And I was like, but why do I feel it so strongly? Well, it ends up 3 months pass, and they had a huge fire on the outside of the building, actually kind of where I was standing. Like I was standing within like 2 or 3 feet of where when I was doing this reading of where the fire was. Whoa. And I was like, oh, okay. So because time is irrelevant when it comes to doing readings. Like you can read the past, like you can read the future. It's very convoluted. And so the fire that happened 3 months later almost destroyed the whole building. And I kept saying, what's in the basement? Like, what's going on in the basement? Like, they're like, there's no basement in this place. And I'm like, why am I getting everything wrong in this place? Like, what is going on? Well, it turns out that the fire that started was underneath the house. So in my brain, I saw it as a basement, but it wasn't. It was just where the wiring was, and the wiring went underneath and then went up the side of the house.
I wanted to ask you, that's one thing I wanted to ask you about your abilities. How do your abilities work? Like you say, you saw it. So are you one that sees stuff, or did the voices just pop? I get the voices that pop in my head.
See, I'm not clairaudient. I'm clairvoyant, so I see things. But a lot of times, I don't know if I see things in the future,
right,
or in the past. There's no time is not linear, so it's really hard. It's like holographic, and so it's really hard sometimes because I will actually see things and they're like, no, that didn't happen, and then a few months later they're like, yes, it did, and I'm like, okay, that's what I'm reading. I'm reading the energy of it. I'm not actually, because I'm seeing it, and I'm and also I do experience it a little bit. I'm I guess I call it clairsentient, where I can feel it. So like if I have to be really careful with touching people, because I can read you by accident just by hugging you, because I can touch an object and tell you everything about the object, like where it's been and stuff. So it's or whatever, it's the most prevalent energy. So a lot of times I'll be seeing it and experiencing it, but like not sure. I mean, that's what happened to me in Jerome. I was in this place and I accidentally touched the wall of this shop I was in, and I got thrown back into, again, another fire. I don't know what the fire things would be, but I touched the building and I heard a bunch of screaming and I heard people jumping out the windows and I saw them land and I was like, whoa, and I got really dizzy because I was like, what the hell was that? And I looked up the history of the place, and that building had been on fire like 3 or 4 times, and there was one time where people got stuck on the 2nd floor and had to jump. So
wow.
It's it can be very disorienting though, because it'll hit you sometimes when, like, I don't know, it I have control over it mostly, but sometimes when I'm not paying attention, it'll hit me. Like I went to the sanitarium once in Northern California, and in Clovis, I think it was, the Wolf Manor, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I was standing on the stairs, and somebody rushed at me from the 3rd floor, I think, 3rd floor, and I was in between the 2nd and 3rd floor on the stairs, and I felt this energy come at me and like try to push me backwards, and I literally almost passed out on the stairs because I wasn't expecting it. And I was like, what the hell happened on the 3rd floor of this place? That was crazy. Like, that was not a good energy. They're like, oh yeah, well, when it was a sanitarium, they put all of the people who had killed people and who were violent up there. And I was like, yeah, you might want to tell me that, because I just got bombarded by somebody who was like, hey, I want to scare you. So it's in those instances where I'm not ready, but I didn't fall down the stairs. I mean, I knew well enough to just sit down and close my eyes and try not to pass out.
Right.
That makes sense.
I've also been with psychics who, see the building, like you say, as it was back in the original state. And I've watched them walk into walls. It's kind of funny. It's funny, but it's not.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time. I never know what I'm seeing. I never. There are times too where I've gone places and I'm not sure if what I'm seeing are real people, like in crowds and stuff. Crowds can be a little bit confusing sometimes because I'm not sure if I'm seeing real people or not, because sometimes I will see people that are in the wrong clothes or not quite dressed right. And I'm like, that's the wrong time period. Why am I seeing that? And then it gets a little confusing because I'm not sure. But that doesn't happen as much. I've learned more to stay more grounded. But I think it's just because I'm older and because I'm used to it more.
Isn't it true that some of these older places also have excuse me, that some of these older places have overlapping eras too, and you guys run into that?
For sure, yeah. It's always for me, and I read differently than other people. Everybody reads differently, but for me specifically, I always go with the strongest energy and then work backwards. So whatever timeline has the most trauma or has the most energy attached to it is usually the one that I pick up on first. And then after I sort through that, then you can go, or I can go down through the layers and kind of pick up on other stuff. But it's interesting though, because one of the things that I'm finding, and this is something that is troubling to me, but also interesting to me, is that there are some ghosts in hotels that aren't real. They're not made up, but they're just based on a lot of stories. And so you'll experience, or I will experience it, and I will know it's not real, but the energy signature is there, and it's more like I want to say a thought form or a Gregor or a Topa, I guess. And that is so fascinating to me because there are some places where I'll scan and I'm like, okay, I see the real energies here. And then I'm like, oh, then now I see all the made up ones too. But you can get EVPs from them and you can interact with them and they will affect your equipment. And it is such an interesting phenomenon because I truly believe that most spirits, especially in heavily trafficked areas where people go out and investigate a lot, I truly believe like 90% of the energy there is thought forms. It's your white ladies, I mean, how many hotels have white ladies that walk down the stairs on the second floor? I mean, come on. Or how many hotels have a man with a mustache with a coattails with the smell of smoke of cigar, and it's always cherry. Or the woman with the rose smell or the lavender smell. Or the children playing with the ball.
Right.
I mean, these are you can go anywhere in the world and you will experience one of these ghosts. And I find them to be interesting because again they have an energy signature, but you can for sure tell they aren't human, that they were never real, that it's just an amalgamation of energy that other people have put into it, and you're afraid and you're scared and you want to believe this story so badly and you want to have the experience, especially if you're just if you watch a lot of ghost adventures and you're going just to have the experience, and you're not really like a true investigator, which is fine. There's a place for everything, but you put all that energy into this ghost story and then it becomes something tangible, but it's not real.
Right.
That makes sense.
It's just that so many people have left an imprint in that spot. It kind of becomes real in a way. I know the Constantinos were doing studies on that.
Oh, were they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were doing studies on that. I thought it was back then. I thought it was a fascinating study. There's a restaurant up here in Auburn where that's happening right now.
That's so fascinating because I think the most interesting part of that whole thought form phenomenon is that you can legitimately interact with it. It's it doesn't have layers to it for sure, and it doesn't have like people with consciousness, or like when you have a really like a real entity or somebody like a real ghost who's been alive and they're still interactive. There are layers. There's a consciousness that happens. There are, I don't know. It's kind of like a croissant. There's lots of layers and there's lots of things you can do with it. These thought forms, they only know their story, and so they don't meander too far from that story. So they will always have the same kind of EVPs or the same kind of anomalies, which is interesting because if you put more energy into it, and if another person puts more energy into it, then it'll change the story so it can grow. But it's definitely going to have more of like that surface feeling to it, and it'll only interact based on what other people have put into it. And so it's fascinating to me that we could even do that as human beings. But I mean, the premise is really the same. It's strong energy, water, electricity, metals, crystals. I mean, it's all there. It's just we're doing it in real time now. If that makes sense.
It makes sense. And like we always say too, about the wood, how wood will hold the energy. And I think I agree with you. I think so many people have gone into a certain building looking for a certain ghost, and everybody knows the legend, so that energy is coming off whoever's there. The wood's soaking it up, and this is where it's all coming from. With, like you say, the stuff that's underground. You got the water, you got the wood, and it's just a place, place looking for a ghost to happen.
Yeah, I mean, so back in 2007, I believe, we actually did a thought form experience. With 6 or 7 people. And we did it was almost like the Philip experiment, where we decided who we wanted the person to be. We wrote it all down. We said it out loud. We did a circle. We did like a ritual, like a spell ritual, to bring the person to life. We created the parameters for it, and then 14 months later, somebody got a photo of this entity. Yeah, her name was Pearl. If you go to thepearlexperiment.com, I have pictures and I have the whole thing documented.
Oh, I've got to check that out. That is really cool.
It's called thepearlexperiment.com, I believe it's THE, thepearlexperiment.com. But we actually interacted with it, and somebody who had no idea about the story, we didn't tell anybody about the ritual. We did it in the middle of the night in this hotel that was haunted, and we decided to use some of the history from the hotel and use some of the folklore that was already in the hotel to kind of anchor it, and then we put our own parameters on it. And like I said, 14 months later, somebody was there, had nothing to do with us, took a picture of this person that looked exactly like our ghost. And then the strangest thing happened. The picture ended up on the Queen Mary, and somebody who did the ritual saw the picture and said, "Where did you get that?"
Wow.
Do you know who that is? And they're like, "No, we have no idea. We just got the picture and I wanted to show it to you. For some reason, I felt compelled to show it to you." And then from there, we took a years off, 10 years or something like that off. And then 3 or 4 years ago, most of the group got back together, minus a few people. And we were able to interact with her again. She showed up.
Wow.
And we asked for markers, like, we want to see your name. So if you really want us to know that you are alive and that you're true and that was really you in the picture, blah, blah, we want to see our name everywhere. Like, we want to see, her name was Pearl. So we're like, we want to see Pearls. We want to see your name. So I went to Vegas, and everybody else went and did their own thing. We all live far away from each other. It's kind of weird. And for like about a month, I kept seeing Pearl everywhere. I went to Vegas, and I don't know how many times I saw the word Pearl. Like, it was kind of ridiculous. There was actually a store that they just opened called The Pearl. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? And so we documented every time we saw the name Pearl or the word Pearl, we took a picture of it, and we just have like months of this happening. And then we took it a step further, and then we were like, okay, we want to interact with you. So we did we just took a glass on a table and did yes or no, and like kind of like a sort of like a, I don't know, it's kind of like a spirit board session without the spirit board.
Sure.
But anyway, and we communicated with her, and then she would tell us things, and then they would happen. And then we went from there, and we did table tipping, and the table went nuts. And I was like, is this really happening? And then she said that she wanted to be sentient. And that's where I was like, okay, I'm done.
Whoa.
This is getting a little bit too weird, because the last thing she said to us is, I'm done being a thought form. I want to be sentient. And I was like, I don't know where to go from here, because like,
how can she have the ability to make a decision like that? That's just weird.
See, yeah. And I know it's just a thought form, and I know it was just an amalgamation of the people who were in the ritual, and then of course we were adding our own energy to it. We created a sigil for her. Nobody knows about the sigil. We do not show the sigil in public, but she has her own sigil. We gave her an energy source, so that she could feed, because that's one of the things, so that she doesn't feed off us. She could feed off of this energy source. But as soon as we gave her the energy source, and as soon as we gave her the sigil, she all of a sudden wanted to be sentient. It was like she started to make decisions. Like, I have literally asked for like, oh, we did this thing. So there's 3 or 4 of us, and we literally wrote things on paper that we wanted to happen. Like, I want to make this much money, or one of my friends was like, who's in the group, she was like, I want to sell 3 earrings by this date.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I've never sold any earrings. I'm like, okay. She sold 3 pairs of earrings within like 2 weeks. And I was like, really? And I asked for a certain amount to come into like a certain amount of money. And I got exactly that amount. Like, everybody who asked for something, we wrote it down, and it happened within like 2 or 3 weeks. Like, it was uncanny how this energy thought form was creating things in our lives.
Cool.
And maybe it's just us manifesting. Maybe it's just putting the energy out there. But I do feel like there was like some help because of how accurate it was, and how it was starting to happen so frequently. And even to this day, like, I'm talking about it now, I'll start to see the name Pearl. I'll start to hear people say Pearl. Like, it'll start up like she wants to be known. So I don't talk about it much because then it gets a little weird around here. But the energy is always there, and it's always available. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And then if you want to get really weird about it, and I don't tell people this very much, but so there's a Slenderman Pearl connection. So one of the group members was talking about Pearl and thought forms and tulpas in relation to Nick Redfern's book. He wrote a book about Slenderman, how Slenderman could be a tulpa, and how folklore, we create tulpas through folklore. Like, even Bigfoot could be a tulpa, because we put so much energy into these folklores. And so he was talking about the attempted murders that happened with Slenderman, and this all came up in conversation, and the Pearl experiment got thrown in there for some reason. And so they were talking about Slenderman and the Pearl experiment. And it was on Coast to Coast, and so the archived interview is actually on the website if you want to listen to it. But it's interesting because in the police reports for the attempted murder, the 2 girls said that they had listened to that particular episode about Slenderman and about tulpas and about the Pearl experiment. They didn't say the Pearl experiment, they just said about tulpas and about Slenderman that night. And they tried to kill their friend that same night. So they listened to Coast, and they're like, okay, we're going to do it. And then they took the girl out into the Waukesha forest.
Nice.
And I'm like, that's very interesting. Because I'm not saying that our experiment had anything to do with it. It's just very interesting that energy of the thought form.
Right. That's something. Wow.
Yeah, it expanded enough for these girls to be like, okay, this is the night. We're going to do it, because it was in their consciousness and it was in their energy field. And they were like, okay, that's the fodder we need in order to make this happen, because it's true. And I'm like, okay, so how does this work? How do thought forms, how do they affect us? Because like I said, I've literally played around with it and have gotten things and asked to see the name and seen it and asked for really odd things to happen, and they show up. So it's an interesting phenomenon to me, because we see it in hotel rooms, but if we take it, there's tulpa magic out there, there's thought form servitor magic out there. People use servitors all the time in magic, but it's an interesting phenomenon because it essentially is the energy of ourselves. But we can also interact with it and create things.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating to me. Absolutely fascinating. I have a question in the chat room for you.
Sure.
And it's, how can you distinguish when you see ahead of a future happening when it will actually happen in our time?
Can't. It's really hard. So This is something that I have trouble with. Some people are better at it than me. Some people are really good at timing. I am not. For instance, I knew my grandmother was going to die in December, and I saw it. And I knew the week, too. It was going to be right before Christmas. It was going to be the third week in December. And I waited, and she didn't die. And I'm like, okay. She was older. It's not, I know that sounds morbid, but she was older. She's in her 90s. So, and she was just really, she looked really bad. So ends up, she died exactly a year later, third week in December. And I was like, wow, I saw it like it was happening like right now.
Wow.
So yeah, it's hard because time doesn't, for me, maybe other people again are better at this, but for me, time doesn't have a date on it.
Mm-hmm.
I usually just see months, or a lot of times, like I knew it was snowing. It was going to be snowing that week. I saw the snow. I saw the calendar. I knew she was going to die. I knew my other friend's mother was going to die in February. Again, she died exactly a year from the date I predicted it. So it's tough. It's tough to dial in the time period. I know just from my own experience that usually if I foretell something like that, it's usually going to happen within 18 months. That's me, just based on doing it enough. But even when I do tarot readings and then people want future stuff, I'm always a little off. I'm always within 2 weeks. I never can nail it down. I hope that answers the question.
I think it did. Now, speaking of experiments, now I was fascinated by this because I had done research on this, but you actually went out with some of your team members and tried the elevator game.
I did, yes.
Tell me about the elevator game.
So that's an interesting one. How do I say it? Okay, so there's something to it. We were not able to replicate the elevator game. We were not able to see the woman on the 10th floor, blah, blah, blah. However, the first couple of times the person went up in the elevator with a camera, he said, there's something really weird about this. The energy changes, but there's a shift. There's something actually happening. But we tried it more times, and the more times we tried it, the less the energy was there. But the first time he said something happened, and I've tried it again in other places,
mm-hmm.
And again, it was that same energy. It was that energy of, this could actually work. I don't know how I feel about that. So I haven't played with it recently because of that. Because, again, it's folklore, and again, it's people putting the energy into it. But it's well known enough now that I think it could actually do something. I don't think you go into a different realm or anything like that. But I think that something about, again, the elevator, it's a dark space. It's kind of like a cave, and then you're going upwards, and the energy spirals upwards. So we're doing that, and we're in a column, so the energy is moving. We're surrounded by metal, so again, careful what you think about in elevators. It could come true.
Well, for people that don't know about the elevator game, don't you have to go in there? I've never tried it. I've kind of read up on it. I watched your report on it on Facebook. You have to push the buttons in a certain sequence, right?
Right. You have to. There are directions. Just look up elevator game directions. It's all there. But again, if so many people have tried it and so many people have put this energy into
mm-hmm.
it, there's something to it. And again, I'm not saying you can go into other realms, but I guess it just depends on how much you believe and how much you put your energy into it and how good of a manifester you are. I mean, that's part of it too. And just being open to the idea of it. I've never met anybody who's actually seen the woman on the 10th floor or got off. But again, I've heard people say, yeah, this is odd. There's something's not right about it.
I don't know if I'd get off if I saw the
There's
woman.
something to this.
I'd be like,
I don't think I want to do that
the
again.
door would open, I'd see the woman and go, okay, it works, goodbye.
Right.
Straight back down, you know? I mean, if it takes somebody with a lot of chutzpah to get off the elevator after they see the woman, you know?
Right. That's not going to be me. I'm not that curious.
I'm not either. I'm just like, okay, I saw you. I'm good. I got my documentation. Goodbye.
Luckily, I have people who are just dumb enough to take a camera and do it for me, but because they want the experience. But,
yeah.
That's not me. I mean, yeah,
Or it's
like I don't mind going in 100 places. I don't mind being pushed or kicked by ghosts, but no way, we're not moving into other realms. That's just where I draw the line.
I just can't handle it. There's always the diehards on the team that want to experience. You're right. That want to experience, or the non-believers that are going to go, oh, nothing's going to bother me. I'm getting on that elevator. I don't care. You know, they start pushing buttons. And then when something happens, they come off and they go, well, it happened. I don't believe it.
Right.
So you're like, well, why did you get on in the first place? You know. Let's talk about tarot a little bit, because you do a lot of tarot reading.
I do a ton of tarot. I actually do tarot for a living. That way.
Well, tell me what's so great about tarot. I mean, there's everybody and their sister is out doing tarot lately. And I guess, you know.
So I started doing tarot when I was in 9th grade, so that was like a million years ago. I'm one of those kids. I was 14 years old, and I'm all like, tarot cards and Ouija boards, that's going to be my jam. And so I just started playing with it, and I let it go for a while. And then when I was in my early 20s, I think I was like 21, 22, I met a person, and he was like, hey, you should read the tarot. And I'm like, hey, I do already. And then I started to study it, like really, really study it. Like he put the bee in my bonnet again, and I was curious about it. And I just went kind of into a spiral and just started studying the whole system. And I don't know. So it's the weirdest story. So when I used to be working corporate and hated working in corporate. And one day I was like, you know what I want to do? I think I just want to be a psychic for a living. And my husband at the time was like, you're crazy. And I'm like, I know, but I think that's what I want to do. And so I got divorced, and I moved to Arizona, and I became a psychic. And that was in 2007. And since then, I have been doing tarot for a living. And I make way more than what I would have made in corporate. So it's lucrative. It's good. It's fun. What's so interesting about tarot? Tarot is really just, for me, and how I explain it, it's really just a tool. It's a tool to get people talking. It's the magic comes from reading the person, the energy of the person, and really understanding their story and understanding what they're really truly looking for. And so there's a psychology to it, and really the cards are just kind of like that gateway to get people focused enough so that you can read their energy, so you can really find out what they want. And you know, these days I've gone from doing regular tarot readings to doing past life readings to doing Akashic Records readings to doing regressive readings to meeting your alternate reality kind of readings, because you can use tarot for that if you know what you're doing and if you understand the mechanics of how things work, how time works, and how the shadow works. And it gets very archetypal and very Jungian, but if you recognize where people are on their archetypal journey and what they're really striving for, and you can go back into those past lives and you can go back into those timelines. One of the really cool things that I've learned how to do is you do a tarot reading and then go into meditation and guide people into their alternate self, like the alternate reality where they have the things that they want in this lifetime, and asking the person that is you, how did you get it? What do I need to do on this timeline in order to to make that happen, and then merging those two energies so that the new timeline has those things and they're available to you. And so I don't know, I've turned tarot into like a tool for evolution, kind of, in my own way, because I'm more interested in humanity and people's stories. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like 90% of people want to know, will he call me?
Yeah.
Or, you know, am I going to get married, or am I going to have children? I mean, people are very base, but in between that, there is that good that you can do with tarot and the structure of it.
Now, you talked about alternate timelines. Somebody I had interviewed told me there were like 12 alternate timelines out there. Is that true? Or do you know?
Multiple. You can. So, I mean, if you want to get into string theory and stuff like that, I mean, every conscious decision that we make creates a new timeline. So there's the one timeline that you made the decision, and the timeline that you didn't. And so, I mean, science right now is very interesting because they're actually starting to realize that there possibly could be alternate realities. I think that's where the 12 came into play, because they're doing studies and they're showing that yes, there could be parallel. You could be running parallel lives. And there's a book, Journey. I think it's called Journey of the Ferryman or something like that. Something like that. And the author talks about how we have the daemon, and the daemon is the seat or the controller of our lives, and the daemon can see our past lives and this life and the alternate life, and will clue you in on sometimes where you need to be and if you need to shift timelines. And we don't have a conscious recollection of our daemon, but we have a subconscious recollection of it. And so they are like what we consider fate, but it's really not fate. It's really the other us coming in and interfering on purpose to get us where we need to go. And if you ignore it, then you make a lot of bad decisions. And if you don't ignore it, then you can do things and change timelines and move things around at will.
Fascinating.
But I mean, that's the thing though, like I have some clients where we have gone in and found the self that has the husband, that has the money, that has the things that they want. And, you know, I usually do a reading for them at first and say, okay, this is the energy that's blocking you right now. So let's go in and find that person that removed the block. Let's ask them. And you go in and they've talked to that person and they're like, okay, this is what the person is wearing. This is what I need to do. And they actually do it. And within 6 months, they have the thing that they want. And it's really interesting to watch. It's really interesting to see how we create our own reality. And I've done it myself. I have actually gone in and quantum leaped to this self that I thought had everything that I wanted. And she told me, like, get over yourself. You already have it. You just don't know you have it. The only thing that's in your way is you. And it's right in front of you. Like, stop being your own worst enemy. And she told me some other things, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And yeah, I started to see things line up, and I started to see things happen. And then one day I bought this cardigan, and I put it on one day. This was months later. And I realized I was wearing the cardigan of the person that I saw in my alternate timeline. And I freaked out. Like, it literally scared me. Like, I was like, I just became the person that I talked to. This is some quantum shit that I just don't even know what to do with right now. Like,
wow,
you know, too much for my brain. I gotta go do something else.
Well, my question with that is, I mean, if you look at if you're able to get into that other timeline and you see that you're married, I mean, are you able to get the name of whoever you're married to, so that way you can work on changing that, or how's that work?
Yes. So you can get, it depends on how forthright you are with yourself. I mean, there's certain things that, just from my own experience, there's certain things that your future self doesn't want to tell you because it'll mess things up, right? So there's a certain amount of enigmatic stuff, but you can see the person. You can, if you're getting married, you can see the person that you married. You can see their name. You can see how many kids they have. You can see how many marriages they've had. You can see everything about them. It's really interesting. I mean, I've had clients who have seen the person they married, and they're like, yeah, I found him. He didn't look exactly like he did on the other side, but it's him. They know. It's weird. It's the energy, the mannerisms, the name, the things start to line up, and they're like, this is exactly what I saw.
That is too cool. It's like a Hallmark movie.
It is, and it's a funky metaphysical Hallmark movie. Yeah, it's definitely.
Not to make fun of you. I'm not making fun of you. I'm just saying.
No.
It's like a Hallmark movie.
It's very interesting. It's I mean, again, that's partly why I study topos and egregores and thought forms, because in a lot of ways it all kind of relates. It's really what we create, and I always tell my clients this. I'm like, if you don't like what's going on, just jump a timeline. They're like, just jump a timeline. Okay, you say like that, that's possible. And like, it is. If we truly are creating realities as we're making decisions, then you can go back and you can find the decision that you were supposed to make, and you can merge those two timelines. You just have to be open to it, and you have to be willing to take that leap of faith, and you have to be willing to believe it. And whether it really happens or not, or whether it's just, like I say this with everything, I mean, past lives, I don't even know if I believe in past lives, but you have to just be open to the idea of it. It could just be an archetypal thing. It could be just showing a shadow part of yourself, but it doesn't matter. Whether you call it a past life or you just call it a lesson, it doesn't really matter as long as it gets you where you need to go. And whether you're jumping timelines or you're just changing energy, who knows? But for me, I see it as jumping timelines. And there's a lot of times in my life where I'm like, I don't like where my life is heading right now. Where's my other alternate timeline? And I go into my Akashic records and I'm like, let's move the timelines, let's shift things. And then I come out of it and I notice things are different. I notice that I get a lot of deja vus and weird things start to happen. And I'm like, okay, it's happening. But again, whether that's in my mind, I'm just making that up, or if it's truly happening, it doesn't really matter as long as the outcome is what I need it to be. That makes sense.
It does. Heather, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I know it was last minute, but I so appreciate it. I really do.
Welcome.
Huh?
I said, you're welcome. I just tangented like so hard.
But again, thank you. You saved me tonight, and I'm sure everybody else out there loved the interview as well, because they actually asked for you to come back.
Oh,
they've been asking for you because they liked you last time, so that was cool. That was really cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So how can people find you?
So I have a podcast. I'm moving into a new house right now that I manifested, and so my podcast is on hiatus. But if you go to Envious, it's NVUSalien.com. That's like the easiest way to get a hold of me. That's my website right now. And then also thepearlexperiment.com if you want to know about the platform stuff that
I'm heading over there after the show. I'll tell you that right now.
Those are 2 places. Yeah. And you can always find me on Facebook. I do answer my messages. So, if you have a question, or if you need anything, or if you want a reading or anything, if you are like, dude, you just said some crazy shit, can you please explain something? Don't be afraid to email me or message me. I do answer.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I hope you have a good rest of the evening. But thank you. I owe you one, okay?
No problem. Have a nice night.
You too, Heather. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, that was fun. I got to pick her brain. It's always nice to talk to someone else who's been doing this for a while. and pick their brain. It's always a blast. Guys, tomorrow we're going to be talking about the angelic realms. Crystal Pomeroy is going to be with us, and she has several books out about talking to your angels and visiting your angels where the angels hang out. So that's going to be an interesting show tomorrow night. If you're watching this show from YouTube, please subscribe. The more subscribers, the merrier for us. And if you liked it, share it with 5 people. If you hated our show, share it with 5 people. Again, we're equal opportunity here. But if you're on YouTube and you look down at, I think it's the right-hand corner. I haven't looked at one of my videos in a while because I'm doing them. There's a little ghost there with a Sherlock Holmes hat on and a magnifying glass. Click on that, and that's where you can share it. That's where you can subscribe. We've got more than 200 videos on that site. And I think you'll like what's out there. Also, it's hard to find us on YouTube sometimes. You have to physically type in California Haunts on YouTube, okay, to find us. Easier way to find us is to go to the website at californiahauntsradio.com. Click on it, the video on the front, that'll take you to the YouTube site. Also, all the archives for these shows, I have links to everything going back the 2 years we've been on in this format at that website. And I'm starting to catalog our 8, 9, 10 years of Blog Talk shows as well. So you not only get these guests, you get those guests. And I'm kind of amazed when I go back to see what guests I had on back on Blog Talk. So it's kind of cool. But I love being on tonight, and I appreciate you guys coming. And I know we're at the state, some of us are wanting to listen to President Biden tonight. And I'm going to get off and shut up here and all that. But it is the first of the month, and it's time for bill. It's bill time for us, and this is my PBS moment because we are a nonprofit. So I finance everything. If a computer goes down, boom, if a modem goes down, boom, it comes out of my pocket. So if you could find it in your heart to donate a little bit, that would be great. And that would be at paypal.me at California Haunts, because I want to keep the show on. And so far, you guys have done really good helping me out. I didn't think I was going to keep the show on this long. All right, because I want to keep bringing guests here. I love doing this. I'm a journalist. This is what I do. So if you could help me out, so it's paypal.me at California Haunts. If you're uncomfortable with PayPal, we have a Venmo. All you have to do is go into the Venmo and just type in California Haunts. Boom, just like that. But I would really appreciate it, honestly, because it is the first of the month and my bills are starting to hit. Also, we'll talk about that ghost hunt, the ghost tour. I'm going to have that up on the website tonight by 11 p.m. Pacific time. And you guys can check out the details on that and what's going to happen during those and how we do it. But it's a really cool event, and there's only 10 spots, so they're going to fill up fast. So if you want to, get involved in that, do it early. All right. So I've got that scheduled for March 26th. I got 3 locations chosen. I have to verify with whichever location is going to go for it, and off we go. All right. I've got 2. I've picked out 2 hotels and a cemetery. So one of those 3 locations is going to pan out. We're all going to go. So just be aware of that. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. I'm going to go watch the rest of the State of the Union address. Love you all, and peace out.